Welcome to the Healing with Love Summit. Step into a world where we choose to move with kindness, love, and acceptance for our neighbors on this planet, no matter their perceived differences. Choose to listen with an open heart. Choose to come from a place of learning and sharing. Welcome. I'm Larissa Russell of Creative You Healing, and I now have with me Becky Scheliga. So welcome, Becky.
Hi. I also have like a little fidget toy too. So if you see that flapping around, that's my toy.
I love it. I love it. Well, then I can tell you, I also,
Yeah, little Pinky. So cute. Mine's a
that's
little
my,
peep.
yeah,
I don't even like peeps, but I thought this was the cutest thing. So
absolutely. Mine, we got in Disney, and I'm not a stuffy person at all. And but every time I walked into one of the shops, I was like, oh my God, it's so
so cute. And I mean, of course, like Disney stuff too. Oh, I love it. It's so cute.
yeah. So he came home, and I didn't buy him. He was purchased for me, but yeah, he came home and he goes everywhere. Well, he doesn't really like to leave the house now. He did that once and he didn't really like it, so
I
I
feel
got for him.
that.
So
I can
now
relate.
he stays home, but we go, he's always here. Anyways, for those who may not know you, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and maybe what you do?
Yeah, so my name's Becky, as we already established. I live with depression, anxiety, and PTSD, CPTSD, and also ADHD. So a fun mix of things. And for my business, I run the company Awkward Alchemy, and I help creative, witchy, misfit weirdo women like me ditch the should, supposed to stuff that they've been told to follow and create a life that feels more authentic, fulfilling, and aligned with who they actually are. And we do it all messy and awkwardly because that's how inner work and healing really looks like. So I think we've all been lied to that it's supposed to be like this perfect little package with a neat bow. It's not like that. So
I absolutely, oh, I just love that because, and I do, every time you put something out, I'm always like, oh my God, I love that because
thank
it
you.
is so authentic. And we all strive to be authentic online. And then we have our own demons and I call them demons for a reason, that we struggle with. Like I've been told, have to show up a certain way and dress a certain way. And I'm really working hard at being authentic online. And in a lot of spaces, I think I have it down, but in a lot, I really still don't.
Yeah.
And we will resonate with the right people when we show up as our weirdo selves.
Yeah. It's so
Yeah.
true. It's so true. And I mean, like, that's been this like whole journey of authenticity for me because that's certainly not something that I've been even allowed to do my whole life. So it's been like a very like twisty, turny, messy process in just like the unmasking and the being like true to who you are. Um, but it really is like so liberating. It's scary as hell, but like it's so liberating, and you're so right. Like you find the people, your people, like the people that get you when you feel like you've never been gotten before in life. So it's very refreshing.
Yeah, it really is. And like I said, I love what you put out because it's just so authentic and it's quirky and there's not enough quirkiness out there, I feel, because everybody's so busy trying to be something else and we all have our quirks and oddities and it's so true. So true. And
Yeah.
as you're trying to show up in the world,
Yeah.
as we all try to show up in the world in our most authentic way, how has that been responded to for the most part? I'm sure there's
um
things on both sides.
yeah, I mean, honestly, like so far, I mean, again, I'm like, this is a very new journey for me in like really being authentic, like to other people. Like, I mean, like it's always like I've had my select little group of like, oh, I can be authentic with this person, and it's been very few people in life, but showing up online like that is a whole different animal, and it's definitely scarier too because like literally anybody can be out there. But I have to say, like overall, I've had a really positive experience with it. and just getting a lot of like really great feedback of, thank you for saying this. Like, this is exactly what I needed to hear. Like, oh my gosh, it's like you're in my head, like that kind of stuff. And it's like, I think that's so important to remember, because this is something like I always have to remind myself is like, I need to do this to heal myself just as much as it can help heal others, like, so I think that's like really important to remember when going on that authenticity journey, is that like you will heal parts of yourself in while also helping others, which is like such a huge and amazing thing to be able to, I'm growing and I'm helping other people at the same time. Like, who would have thought? That's awesome.
It's so true. It's so true. And I think one of the things that we're afraid of, because we've got trolls online and they always want to say horrible things, but like you said, the majority of people are going to accept you for who you are, and the rest that, are not so keen on it are going to move on. And it doesn't matter if you show up authentically or as something else, you're going to find a troll. So you might as well show up authentically and be yourself and find those people that resonate with that, rather than trying to be something you're not all the time, which is exhausting.
It's true. And one thing that like you just said there is like, I was gonna say, like, I've met plenty a troll in my life, but I feel like I've actually met more when I wasn't being true to who I was than now that I'm actually stepping out and being true to who I am, because I was attracting all the wrong people, and I was surrounding myself with all the wrong people. And so, and being something that I'm not. So yeah, like I didn't, I don't think I've ever really thought about it that way, but I was like, whoa, wait a second. Like I've had a lot more problems with people in general trolling when I was like not being authentic than when I am.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. And I know for my own self, like I masked for so long and I still catch myself doing it, right? I still catch myself because it became such a habit trying to fit in the world, and then being diagnosed for myself, being diagnosed at 50 with autism, 55 with ADHD, and now trying to figure out what is actually like part of that. What's my quirky personality? What have I been like? How have you found that? Like, you're much younger than I am, but you still have, I'm sure, suffered from that.
Yeah, and I mean, like, so I was diagnosed with like depression and anxiety um back when I was like 15. So that's been a much like I've been, sort of aware and dealing with that for much longer. But there was still a lot of masking that happened with that because I did not have supportive people in my life. And I feel like there's still a stigma around mental illness, but, 20 plus years ago, like, forget it. Like, you didn't talk about it. And so there's definitely a lot of masking that went on with that. But then, much like yourself, like I was late diagnosed with autism and ADHD. So that's only been this year. So I'm still learning so much about that. And like you said, like what even is my what how does my autism show up? How does my ADHD show up? Like, and then the more like I sort of unravel that, I'm just like, wow, like how did nobody like know that there was something going on? Like really, but again, because I had to learn to mask all that stuff, like how many times that, like, when I look back and I'm like, oh, that's like a symptom of my ADHD. And I look back on my life and I think about all the times that showed up and all the times that I was shamed for it, or I was made to feel like less than, or like that I'm doing something wrong, or like being too much, or not enough, or whatever. Um, so then it's like, you learn at that age, like, oh gosh, I can't do that. So then I have to like push through and like pretend like I'm not like that. And like that's been my whole life. So it really has been this journey of like, who actually am I? Who am I without all of the shame and all of the guilt and all of the, negativity? And, and what is actually mine too? Like that's the other thing, because there's a lot of stuff that I feel like I still carry, but then I listen to it and I'm like, that's not my voice. That's so and so that told me that, before. And like, but it's like, that's all part of the process. And it can be hella frustrating sometimes, but at like the end of the day, like I would much rather like really appreciate myself for who I am and embrace those parts of me, because they are the parts that make me like weird and wonderful, and like those are the parts of myself that like actually when I've been behind closed doors, like I love the most. And I'm like, gosh, I wish I could share this with someone, but like they would just think I'm weird, and like now it's just like, well, I hope they think I'm weird because being weird is cool, like
I love that because it's true. And going through life masking to fit in, what it has cost. I know what it's cost me. Can you speak a little bit about the cost to you of masking?
yeah, I mean, it's such a great point because as an adult now, like I'm just perpetually exhausted. Like I can't, I feel it's so frustrating because I look back on my life and I'm just like, well, I used to be able to do this. Like I used to be able to do that. And it's like, well, you spent a lifetime having to be this high functioning, normal human being, constantly being judged, constantly being watched. So you had to hold that all in. That takes a lot of energy to do that, to uphold this image that the rest of the world has of you is exhausting. And when you're doing that 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, uh, it's like uh, it's like my energy store now, like there is none. I basically just feel like I don't know how to function anymore. And like that's like it's sad to me because if I had been able to not have to mask my entire life, like I think it would be so much easier to function now, like yes, I would still have to make accommodations for myself, but there's nothing wrong with that. But it would be on a much like lower level than it is now, where it's like just to do even sometimes like the simplest of tasks, I'm like I just can't, like I don't have it in me anymore. And I think that's been like maybe one of like the biggest tragedies of masking is that like people don't understand the amount of effort and energy that goes into that, and for what purpose really.
Hmm.
Like honestly, like because it's like who gets to say what a person is supposed to look like, how a person is supposed to act, but yet we all believe in this like sort of hierarchy of like what a person is supposed to look like and how a person is supposed to act. And when we don't fit into that mold, like we have to try and be something we're not and mask and use all our energy and exhaust ourselves. And it actually, I mean, from a health perspective, even not even just a mental health perspective, but a physical health perspective, that's really damaging to
Hmm.
people.
Yeah. I honestly am starting to think that I didn't actually suffer from depression and anxiety. I suffered from overwhelm, not
Mm-hmm.
being diagnosed and having to mask for so long. You can only keep it up for so long. And
It's
then
so
you
true.
completely fall apart because you have nothing left. And not knowing that that's what it was, I kept trying to push through. And of course,
Yeah.
our medical system immediately goes to depression, anxiety, because we're women, and
Mm-hmm.
not even looking at what else. I also know that they've only recently, in I would say the last 10, 15 years, really started to understand women and autism.
Yeah.
And so that, and even ADHD for that matter, because we present very differently and we do
Yeah.
mask better. We can watch the signs and become socially acceptable.
Mm-hmm.
And, but it does cost us. It costs us a lot. And now it's like, I have to be so careful because I want to be able to keep moving through the world, but I don't want to use up everything I have. And
Yeah.
yeah.
It's so true too. I mean, I actually just had like sort of a revelation like within the past couple of days about because I have a thing where I don't like being blindsided. Like I don't like like it's very, I'm sure you know, being autistic and having ADHD, it's like the autistic side of me really does like the routine and the structure and like knowing what's coming and being prepared. But like the ADHD is like, oh my God, that sounds terrible. Like I don't want to do any of that. Like, let's just flit about and see where we land, kind of thing. But I don't like being blindsided. I don't like, when I don't know like how a person's going to react or what a person's going to say, or like how like if someone's like, I hated like being randomly called on in class because it's like, well, I didn't have an answer prepared, like, so because I didn't know you were going to ask me this question, and then I just feel stupid. And I've had like social anxiety, or I was diagnosed with social anxiety as well, and like I always have this like in conversations, oh my gosh, what if I don't know what to say? What if I say something really stupid and everybody thinks I'm dumb and everybody hates me and all this other stuff? And it's like, I started to wonder though, I was like, this could just be like part of my autism, and that my brain just processes things differently, and like I need that preparation. Like there's nothing wrong with that. Like I was thinking that it was like this weakness in me, like I grew up thinking that it was like this awful weakness, and I have to push through, I have to overcome this fear or whatever. But like I started like shifting that perspective and thinking like, well, it's not really a fear. Like I think it's just how my brain operates, and I've been basically downloading software that's not compatible with my operating system. But that's so much of the world, is it's not designed for our operating system. And so it makes it very difficult to navigate the world in this way. And and especially when no one wants to listen to you, no one wants to take you seriously, like because it's an invisible disability, it doesn't really exist in people's minds. And again, so damaging, like just all around.
Yeah. Yeah, it really, just as you were talking about that, it made me think I always was the driver, right? I was always the driver. And because I was always uncomfortable being a passenger, and it was just in the last couple of years that I finally realized I was constantly calculating the route. And if I wasn't driving, I would have to ask, right? Like, why are you turning here? What? Because I'd have to recalculate it. And that sounds ridiculous in our world, but that's the way my brain works. So it was constantly calculating what the path was, what route we were taking. And if you didn't follow what I thought you were going to do, I had to go through this whole recalculation. But it took me, 50 plus years to figure that out, that that's
Yeah.
what was happening. If I had known that before, then I could make that, because now I can be in the passenger seat and say, you know, I just need to know which way we're going.
Yeah.
And that's fine. So if I'd had that 50 years ago, wow, the anxiety that would have been gone with that. Just that one simple thing.
It's so true. It's like I mean, I think about, like, I don't necessarily like to like think about things in a term of regret, because everything that I've been through has made me the person that I am today, and I like the person that I am today, so I don't want to be somebody else, you know but it's like it's hard, it's like a balancing act, because uh a lot of times it's like, well, like you just said, if I had known about this all this time, like what a different life I would have had, like what a different experience I would have had as a person moving through the world if I had just known about this. Like if somebody had just paid enough attention, or if somebody had just asked, like, hey, what's going on with you? Like not even, like, even if it wasn't like my parents taking me and getting me a full-blown diagnosis or whatever, but it was just like literally just taking the time to say, like, hey, like, what's going on here? Why are we feeling this way? But like, unfortunately, like they're just like emotionally inept. And so that wasn't really something that was ever a topic that was ever broached. I mean, I I had to beg to go even get like evaluated for depression and anxiety, like, because, I was told like I was doing it for dramatic effect and that's not a real thing and I just need to get over it. So it was like I had to basically wear my mom down to the point where it was like, okay, fine, I will just take you so we can stop talking about this, and even with a diagnosis, it was still like, okay, we're going to not talk about this, kind of thing. Because then it was the other side of like, oh, well, we can't let people know that you're like this.
Oh yeah, the stigma that goes with, I mean, depression, anxiety had its own stigma, right? Like mental health, not talking to anyone. And then if you I was diagnosed right around the time that Asperger's really was the word was sort of being dropped. And so most people understood like Asperger's was what they considered higher functioning,
Mm-hmm.
whereas it's really a spectrum. And so if you say autism as opposed to Asperger's, then they automatically think about, the little boy banging his head, nonverbal. And it's like, there's really a spectrum on this. So even just getting my own self comfortable with the word, and then, other people are like, no, you don't. Like nobody would believe me because I masked so well. But then
Yeah.
also the stigma that's attached to the word, right?
Yes.
And it's been a real journey, I have to say, that I'm not over yet. I'm still struggling with. But if we think about how people can help, or maybe not even help, just allow, what would be one thing that you would suggest to just allow people to be who they are, or one way they could? I don't even know how to ask the question.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting thing. I think a big part of it is like, I mean, first of all, is having conversations like these. Like this needs to be talked about more because like educating is such a big part of it. Um, like because I think about it like even when because one thing I was gonna when you were talking is just like even like in the DSM, which is used like as the criteria to diagnose these things, like I feel like it lacks so much of what it actually means to have autism or ADHD or um, depression or anything like that. Like where it's just like, even the medical field, I feel like is so far behind the times in what is actually going on. Um, so I think like, I mean, we as people who live with it, like I just feel like we have to be more verbal about it, because there's still that stigma there. There is like it's better than it was 20 plus years ago, but it's still there. It still exists. And it's like, and I kind of hate the fact that we as the people that live with it who have struggled with it our whole lives and have been made to feel a certain type of way about it, like that we have to be the one that sort of stand up and like carve that way. But it's like unfortunately no one's going to do it for us, and if we want to see like real change, we have to do it ourselves. And I just feel like, what I mean, I'd rather, even though like I don't necessarily have the energy, and and it's like, and it's hard from even not just an energy perspective, but like from feeling like my voice matters and feeling like it's safe to talk about this. It's really hard for people who have been stigmatized their entire lives with it to be the ones who have to talk about it. But until we do talk about it,
Mm-hmm.
like there's still that there would still be that what's the word I'm looking for? Words are hard sometimes. There's still that chance that like everybody could say, well, this doesn't really exist, because again, like it is invisible. Like I mean, I don't think that I should have to like visibly look a certain way for you to realize that I have a disability or to accept that. But that's the times that we kind of live in. Um, but I think like the more we can share our lived experiences and the more we can talk about like what is actually going on, because again, even the way that these things are portrayed in the media,
Mm-hmm.
it's not really accurate. I feel like even in textbooks or like you read about it, it's not really accurate. I think we need to go to the people who are actually living with this, and we need to listen to them, and we need to like have these conversations, because those are the people that know what this is really like, and who know like what they need and how to really like, advocate for change, because they're the people living with it every single day.
Mhm.
And again, like it kind of sucks that the burden has to like be on our back, but for me, like I don't care at the end of the day, because like I think we do need to have like that sort of revolution. We do need to use our voices about it, because it's such an important change that needs to be made.
I absolutely agree. I absolutely agree. And I think who better to speak than those living with it? But then also, it's exhausting to have
Yeah.
to like share that. I just want to unpack the word disability because that's how it's seen, right? All of these like depression, anxiety, autism, ADHD. And I'm not picking on you for using the word because that's absolutely how it's seen. But really, it's only a disability because we're not accepted. Would it be a disability if we were accepted and allowed to be who we are? That that's where I get caught up with it. And then it starts like, well, then everybody, right? Like, um, if you're blind, is that a disability or is it because it's not accepted? And then so then we don't put things in place. I don't know. I'm asking, but
Yeah.
it's a real struggle to think just not being accepted for who you are is seen as a disability. It seems messed up somehow. So,
It's
thoughts?
true. It's true. I mean, like you kind of said, I kind of see both sides of it, because I, I sort of like, for a long time I struggled with even saying like I had a disability, with like actually even like admitting that, or like wanting to say that, because again, even the word disability I feel like has a stigma, like it's because again, it's not fully accepted, like, oh, you don't look normal then if you have a disability, like you're not a normal person, whatever the hell that is. But like I just feel like so even that was a struggle. But it's like, because I also hate thinking that like that I can't do something, like that this is harder for me to do. Like and so many times in my life I just would say like I wish that it wasn't like, I wish that I wasn't like this, so that I could just do, everybody else makes it look so easy to just go and do a thing, and I can't do it. And I hate the fact that I can't do it. So like just another reason why I really didn't want to like kind of admit that like I had a disability or that it was a problem. But I feel like, as I've gotten older, it's not like, and again, I think this comes with acceptance, is that it's not that I can't do the thing that that person's doing. It's just I have to do it in a different way. And that's not really a problem. What is the problem is that society doesn't really accommodate for that, as on, on a larger scale. And that's again not really accepted. Like, what do you mean you have to do it a different way? Like, oh, now you're just being difficult because you're asking for like different standards. Like, what makes you special that you can't just do it the way that, this whole group of people is doing it, and so like I do see both sides of it, where it's like, yeah, some things are harder for me, like that's just how it is. But I don't necessarily feel like that makes me incapable. It's just, is there a different way that I need to be doing this? You know? Um, Now, obviously, like, I feel like that's not all disabilities, like there are obviously some disabilities where, like, okay, you literally can't do, like, if you can't walk, then no, you can't walk upstairs. Like, that's fair. But, like, again, like, I do think that word disability has a lot of stigma behind it as well. And even just like shifting the way we think about that. And like you said, a lot of with acceptance, and like it doesn't have to mean a bad thing. But I just think like we need to accept it and we need to accommodate. Like the world needs to be more accommodating. That's the big thing for me is accommodation. It's like even places that say they're accommodating, it's like accommodating to whom? Because like like I don't really think you have asked people who need the accommodations whether you're actually accommodating, because but just because you hit some government standard of accommodation, you think you're accommodating. But again, it's you're not talking to the people who are living through it and actually have the needs, and so therefore like you think you're helping but you're really not, at the end of the day.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. And I think that's been a big problem that we've had because with our medical system not even recognizing girls, women with ADHD, autism, they really have no idea. So they've started recognizing, but they know things are different, but they don't really know what's different. And of course, it's a spectrum. So it's like everybody's different. And then having autism on its own or ADHD on its own or having both is different again. And so, like you said, I really struggle with that too. Like I need routine, but I can't be bored. So it's like, it's like, how do you have routine without getting bored? And so, having to have that, you know, I don't know, throw a monkey wrench in. And I think I do that to myself because I need that, right? I need the routine, but then I have to throw a wrench into it every so often because I get bored. And it can be very traumatizing when you do that,
Yeah.
especially when you do it to yourself, because then you're like, oh, I'm self-sabotaging. It's like, yes, it may look that way, but actually it's all of these other things, right? And
Yeah.
yeah, just I mean, I guess it's hard for other people to understand when I know I don't even understand, but just
Mhm.
give us some grace to figure it out and not expect everyone can do everything the same way.
Yes, 100%. And I just had this conversation not that long ago, or like I put it on my Instagram, but it was like this whole idea of like high functioning and low functioning as well. Like that's like more language that we need to completely throw out
Mm,
like and stop saying that, because it's so again so damaging, because it's like when you're considered high functioning, then it's like, well, you don't really need these accommodations, so like are you even, do you even have what you say you have, or like do you even really have a problem, or like whatever. And then when you're low functioning, it's like you're dehumanized, like you're basically like considered a worthless human being because you can't function on this level. And like again, like how does that make the person living with that feel when that's how they're referred to, on both ends, because both ends suck, like when you're putting it that way. So it's like, even just some of the language that we use around it, again, not just like disability, but even like those terms and phrases, like it's not helping anybody, and it's not helping the people that are living with it and are feeling that way, but it's not even helping people, I don't think, like understand that don't have to, like that aren't living with these things, because again, like that's I think where their mind goes is like high functioning, oh, like well then you don't really need any help, you don't need like accommodations, you don't need to be supported because you're high functioning, you can do it, like or whatever. And it's like, again, going back to that cost, like yes, I do all these things, but like at a cost, like you know what I mean, like I come home at the end of the day, or like at the, it's like 5 o'clock rolls around and I'm just like I'm wiped out, and I might not be able to like get out of bed for the next 2 days because I had to power through all of this stuff. So it's like, yeah, okay, I did all the things that you asked me to, but I'm paying for it.
mhm. Yeah, I actually heard it recently, like there's a very low percentage of especially women with autism that work. And I
Mm-hmm.
think part of it's not being diagnosed. So there's probably a lot that do, but you can either work or you can have a life. And you often can't do both, like work outside the home, go to a job that has certain
Yeah.
expectations, because it takes everything out of you. And then you have nothing left when you get home. And so, like, you can do one or the other. And I think making accommodations, again, for people to work from home or to, change up how they do things, the hours that they work, or the meetings. Like, do we need to have a meeting, or can I just like listen to it and give my input, by
Yeah.
email? That would make a huge difference to me, right? So all of those sort of things, can we accommodate people's requirements?
Hmm.
Because we're seeing too much of this burnout, this, depression, anxiety. And I think a lot of it is we just need to accommodate people where they're at. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't ever push people to be better or do more, but sometimes when we do that, we are really hurting much more than helping.
Yeah.
And so like let's find what that is for each person so that we can all contribute to the world, to our, city, civilization, our life in a productive way
Yeah.
without absolutely burning out each person. Because
Yeah.
yeah.
And yeah, so there's two things that as you were talking that popped into my head. And it's like, I think another thing that is really important for like people to understand is that for some people, going to work outside of the home, let's say, like for you, it's just like, oh, I just put my clothes on, I brush my teeth, I have my cup of coffee, I get in my car, I drive to the office, I do my work, I drive home. But like for someone like me, it's more like I am like my brain is like breaking it out in all the steps. So it's like, okay, I gotta peel myself out of bed, and then I gotta go to the bathroom, and then I gotta wash my hands, and then I have to put toothpaste on the toothbrush, and then I gotta brush my teeth, and then I gotta wash it off, and then I have to mouthwash, and then I have to pick out my clothes, and then I have to put them on. Where so it's like I'm looking at all of the steps, and that's like super exhausting already, and I haven't even walked out the door. Now I have to commute, and like you were saying, with the driving, I am, I know like obviously people are serving like as you're driving, you're watching, but it's like I actually just learned like recently, like people with ADHD are very much more like over calculating. Like they're looking 20 steps ahead essentially on the road than people without it. And so even that, even driving a car is like way more exhausting for someone who has ADHD than someone who doesn't, because like they're, constantly serving and making these like tiny little like it's basically like a beautiful mind is happening. Like you're making all these calculations and like connecting these strings and like kind of thing where it's just like, and then God forbid somebody acts like not the way you thought they were going to, which obviously happens as you drive. And then it's like you have to recalculate it all. It's like, oh, we have to wipe out everything we just thought about and we have to redo it. And then, you know, so it's just like, for where somebody who, maybe has a neurotypical brain, they're not like to them, it's just, I just get dressed. It's one step, I get dressed. Like, but for somebody with a neurodivergent brain, it's like, no, that's like 20 steps that I have to do. And so it's like, that's exhausting. I'm already exhausted and my day hasn't even started. So it's like, I think that's a really important aspect of it too, is that like, there's so much more that's going on behind the scenes just for me to do like what seems like a really simple task for someone else. And then you go to work and it's like, again, it's not just doing the work. Like you said, like sometimes there's meetings. I worked at a company for a while that had like the most meetings I have ever experienced in my life, and they were all pointless. And I feel like I had to be in maybe 1% of the meetings that we would have. And it's like, why am I here? Like I don't understand. Or you could have told me this in an email. Like it really didn't need to be an entire meeting. Like, but it's also the human interaction, is I guess what I'm trying to say. Like it's not just me sitting here and doing my job. There's more that's expected of me than just having to do my job. Having to do my job in and of itself takes a lot of effort and energy. But now you also have the human interaction. You have the people that just want to have small talk and conversations. And oh gosh, like don't get me started on small talk. But like, um, but then you also have like your boss who comes in and asks you a random question, and again, I wasn't prepared for this question. Oh god, like now I have to come up with, I've been blindsided and I don't like that, and I didn't have like an answer ready for you. It's just like, so there's so much that's like going on. So you're right, like by the time I would get home at the end of the day and then have to think about like, oh, now I have to make dinner, and now I have to clean up after dinner, and I have to shower, and I have to do all these other things. It's like I have to just adult and like, no, like it's so much. And I mean, that could be a whole other conversation, just capitalism in and of itself, of how like it does not like, cater to, I mean, it's really anybody. Let's be fair. Like, I don't think it caters to anybody, like, and we're all expected to do a lot more than like we used to be in communities and kind of like tribes and people, and doing all the things like they'd cook for everybody, and like people would help you watch your children, and like all these sorts of things that like we don't have anymore. And so I think on a global scale, like we're all just exhausted, but then you add on the fact that like you're going through these mental processes, like it's, I say it all the time, but I'm like, sometimes it's like an actual miracle that I got through the day, because it's like I don't know how I did that. And again, like we go back to the, that's damaging.
Mm-hmm. And I think because I'm like, how come knowing is harder than not knowing? But it's not. It's just that before I would push through until I completely broke. And now that I recognize it, it's like, okay, at the end of the day, I'm tired. I know not to push through because I've done too much during the day. Whereas before I would push through until, I was on a leave from work, or I was in the hospital or something, because I didn't recognize the signs. Whereas now I recognize it. And so on a daily basis, I go, okay, that's too much. I can't do anything else. Like, don't ask me to do anything in the evening. Like going out in the
Yeah.
evening is a lot,
Yeah.
because, I people all day and I love what I do. And I have mini breaks because I work from home, which is great. But at the end of the day, I'm still tired. But now I'm smart enough. Now I have the knowledge
Yeah.
to know that I need a break. And
Yeah.
and so going and doing more is too much.
Yeah, but I mean, like, and that's the other thing, is like, it's good that like you've set this life up for yourself that you can do that. Whereas it's like not everybody has that. And I mean, like, yes, you can try and set a life up like that for yourself, but it's like, I mean, maybe you like your job, maybe you like your 9 to 5 job, and you would just wish that like the world was a different place where you could function there and not feel so completely exhausted by the end of the day. And I think like that's where, like, again, like it comes back to these like accommodations. Like I saw this post where it was like this person, I think they said they had ADHD maybe, but it was like because like our circadian rhythm is also like shifted as well. So it was like I worked at this job where they would not accommodate my needs. Like I needed to work later, like start work later and then work till a later hour in the evening, and they wouldn't accommodate that. And I was unreliable. I would miss meetings, I would miss calls with clients, like I wouldn't show up or whatever because I just couldn't get there on time. And then I got a job where they did accommodate my schedule, and I have like 5-star reviews, like clients rave about me. So it's like it turns out that I wasn't unreliable. It was because I didn't have accommodations, that like the accommodations were unreliable. And I think that's such an important thing to think about, is like, everybody is an individual and they have individualistic needs. So to say like we all start our day at this time and we all end our day at this time and we all take lunch at this time, like we're not robots. Like that's not how this works, like we don't all operate in the same way. And when we're not, kind of looking at that and asking these questions and having these conversations, then like, it again, it puts the onus back on us where, oh, now I'm unreliable. so not only do I have all this stuff going on, well, now I'm unreliable. I'm a flake. I can't do my job. Like, I suck at life. Like, why can't I do anything right? And again, it just perpetuates our own cycle of, these self-deprecating thoughts.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So then as we move through the world thinking that we're the problem, and then we finally recognize that we're not really the problem, it is, you know, the way the world is set up, neurodivergents don't fit. So it's like, what can we do differently? And then how do we explain to people because they think, oh, we're flakes, or we can't do this, or we can't do that, and oh, you're socially inept, or you're you know um, whatever term they want to use. And then how do we explain that to people so that they get it? I don't like I don't know.
Yeah,
Maybe it's
it's
just these conversations explaining.
I really do, like, again, like, I really do think that's a big part of it, is because, like, again, like, the more we internalize, the less people are going to understand, and again, like, again, it is frustrating because it's like, why is it always my responsibility, like, to educate you? Like, you could educate yourself or whatever, but it's like, um I just think, like, the more that we can at least, like, have these conversations, like, even if it is really just like putting it on your social media, like, I love like seeing it more and more, like, on Instagram, on TikTok, on like Facebook, where it's just like, just people like calling it out and just saying, like, look, this is a thing, like, just like, these are things you should not say to a person with depression, like, and here's some things maybe you should say instead, or like, these are some things that happen because of ADHD, like, I'm not being difficult, or I'm not being like whatever. This is literally what I'm going through. Like, I love seeing more and more of these things, like, of people just really calling out, like, not only just being authentic, but just, speaking their truth, like, and saying, like, this is what's happening. This is why it's happening. Like, give me some grace, kind of thing. Um, and I just think that's so important, the more that we can. And again, like, I don't, in that way, it's like, it's not really taking like that much effort to say, like, hey, these are three things you shouldn't say to somebody with ADHD or whatever. Like, that's really harmful. Like, don't say that or whatever. Like, and that's in the same, that's me putting it out there into the world and saying, like, and speaking my truth and being authentic about it. But then that's also like, somebody that watches this video, like, I just educated them, and it really didn't take that much effort or energy for me to do it. Like, it was just taking something that I basically have to deal with day in and day out, and just saying, like, hey, look. And I mean, like, I do think a lot of it, like, yes, are there, again, going back to like trolls and haters and just negative, unsupportive people in the world? Absolutely, they are. But I choose to believe that there are more supportive, loving, caring people that legitimately just don't know,
Mm-hmm.
and like, and are willing to know, but they just don't, because they haven't been told, or they haven't been shown, or much like, me growing up in an environment where, like, I was not supported. And I think it's coming from a generation that this was not, we don't talk, this is not a thing, this is not real, we don't talk about this, like, it's a bad thing, like, oh, you're crazy then, and like, we're going to fit you for a straitjacket kind of thing. Like, I mean, that's like some of the imagery that, like, I grew up with, just based on the people around me. But it's like, the more that we can have these conversations, we keep breaking those generational chains, those, that trauma, and working through that. And I think that's so important.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is. And, being much older than you are, that's exactly it, right? Like, they just didn't know. Like I went through an angry phase with my parents because it was like,
Yes.
come on, like, seriously. I can't believe that I suffered this much. But they really just didn't know. Like you were supposed to behave a certain way, and if you didn't, you got beaten. And so you just did what you needed to do. I now recognize how much that traumatized me. And then I had other traumas on top of that, but that alone would have been enough, just trying to fit in. And so as we learn, we of course do better. And people have to talk about it. That's one of the reasons we're doing this, right? It's like we're all people we want the same things. We want to be loved. We want to be accepted. We want safety. And yet we're all unique. We all have differences. We all have these different labels that we wear and yet we still have to move through one world, supposedly all behaving the same way. And
Yeah.
so that's where the struggle is, right? That's where the
Yeah.
struggle is.
Yeah. It doesn't make much sense. Like when you think about it like that. But it's like, I always say like it's, obviously like you can't do better until you know better, right? But it's like, because I look at, like I blamed myself for a very long time about like, when I was younger. Like I was always the problem. I was always the one doing something wrong or being wrong or whatever. And so I carried that with me like far into my adult life. And then all of a sudden kind of realizing like, wait a second, like none of this was my fault. Like I was a child. Like how could I have known any better? Like, so how was I wrong? How was I being the certain way? And if you didn't teach me anything differently, like how would I know the rules if you're not like teaching them to me? So it was like really like this understanding of like, okay, you know what, like none of that was my fault. But now like as an adult, like it is my responsibility to do something different because I know better. And I think like that's something that's so important because like even with my parents, like I mean, I love them, and I like, what I mean, like they're my parents, always going to be that. But it's like, sometimes I really do need to like just distance myself because that's what's healthy for me, because I feel like they are still not really the, you know, I'm gonna change, you know what I mean, kind of thing. Like I feel like I am that generational like, pattern breaker in my family. Like, and I was always the black sheep. It makes a lot of sense, like, kind of thing. But it's like, I think that's what's so frustrating about it is it's like, no, maybe you didn't know any better because that's how you were raised and you were just doing the best job that you could. But I think where I get stuck is like, that's just an excuse now, though, like that you're using because you don't want to face whatever it is internally that, you need to work through. And like, yes, I get it. Like, it can be scary what's going on inside of you, especially when you haven't dealt with it for so long. You're like, oh, what am I going to find in there? Like, that can be really scary, but it's like, I mean, I don't know that like, is it any better like moving through life just like on autopilot, like not really knowing yourself and knowing anything? I don't know, just moving through the world like that. Like, I can't. Yeah, it's scary, but like, why? Like, and this goes back to what you were saying before is like, I think we need to push ourselves, but in a way that works for us, that feels good for us, that like, and that's something that I really try, like in my work, like try to teach, like, you don't have to leap out of your comfort zone, like stretch your comfort zone, like just take a step like in that direction. Like it doesn't have to be this grandiose, like magnificent thing. Like just take one little step, because complacency is not a place like worth being in. It just really isn't, to me.
And especially if you expect me to completely change who I am so that you feel comfortable with.
Exactly.
So
Like,
yes, can we all step to, into really, let's step into love so that we can be
yeah,
kind to each other and accept who we are, accept who somebody else is, and then hopefully work together to come to some sort of understanding.
Yeah, I mean, 100%, because it's like, because that whole word love too, like, I think it's really important. It's like, you love me, then you have to love all parts of me. And this is a part of me, and I think like that's just like so important in the concept of love. Like, it's not about loving the parts, only loving the parts that are easy to love, it's loving the parts, all of the parts.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I want to thank you so much. This has been an amazing conversation. Do you have any final thoughts before we go today?
No, yeah, I really enjoyed this conversation and a lot of things that we talked about. And I'm, I'm actually like, I find I didn't get angry. Like a lot of times when I talk about this stuff, I start getting like angry because I'm just like, something needs to be done. Like something's got to change. So I really just like appreciated the conversation of like, and being able to just like approach it in this way that it's like, it doesn't make me angry. Like it just felt good to talk about.
It is because it's true. I have to say I get angry sometimes too because it's like, come on, is this really that difficult? But it is because that's not what you've been taught, and I'm having to figure it out for my own self too. So
Yeah, and it's just frustrating because it's like, come on, we're about to go into 2024 here. Like, why are we still having the same broken conversations, or like, you know, operating in the same broken system? Like, it's ridiculous.
it really is. It really is. Well, thank you again.
Yes,
Thank you,
thank you.
Becky. Thank you for watching this interview. This interview was part of our Healing with Love Summit, which includes healing practices with each interview. If you're interested in learning more or purchasing the full summit with interviews and healing exercises, click the link below. Remember that it is a choice how we move through this world. Choose love. Love heals.